Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Did a little bit today. I, right, in comparison to the rest of the week, I did a little bit. I still got outside. I went for a walk. Today is Terry Fox Day here in Canada. I was really surprised to see how much of the city was actually shut down. I decided I was going to go for a walk, go down to the Forks and hang out there for a little while. I thought it would be super busy. It was kind of quiet. The whole city seemed a little bit quiet. I don't know if it is the smoke in the air. If you don't know, I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. We're dealing with wildfires right now. We're a huge province. You could actually fit three or four states into our province. That's how big we are. Lots of people say, "Oh, when they come to visit, they say, "Oh, Cindy, come and visit me. I'm in Toronto. I'm just going to be here for a few days." And I'm thinking, you guys, right? It would take me over 2 days to drive to Toronto from here. That's how big our provinces are in Canada, right? They're like countries themselves. And who's to say that somewheres down the road in the future, maybe thousands of years from now, that this province might actually be a country. I know the states have been trying to, right, kind of nudge us, kind of stuff us in a corner where we don't have a choice and say, "Hey, you could be our 51st state." Oh my goodness. That would not be a good idea, would it? The largest state in all of North America, a state that takes up half the country. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But then again, in our grumblings about our government, the way things are run, you know, people always throw out there as a little threat. Oh, we're going to separate. Quebec did it for decades. Now, not so much, right? It is in that time span that we get to realize that maybe our next door neighbor is not the bad guy, right? I know quite often that because of differences, and you can look at it out in the world and all the different conflicts and disagreements and that bullying that goes along, that we do kind of, right, look down a little bit in what's different, what we perceive to be weak or not as strong, not as beautiful, not as smart, not as kind, right? And kindness, my cup even says, right? Be kind. Be kind. And this is a little bit in my movement. Kindness, it is a word that is very, very important to me, very important for my hopes for the world. I know it sounds silly, but my hopes for the world and going forward. Because in my own life, there hasn't been, right, a majority of kindness. I'm not going to say that there hasn't been kindness because there has been lots of kindness. And it doesn't matter if that kindness was manipulated, it had a little bit of a contract, it had a little bit of expectation of return. It doesn't matter. In the moment, in my need for what was needed or wanted, if I was feeling a little bit down and, somebody thought to do something or give me something to cheer me up, maybe in respect to something again, in a reward or in a thank you or an expectation of that person who gave it to me, it doesn't matter. It still was a kindness for me. It was still something that uplifted and pulled me out of something that was difficult, something that I thought would never be resolved, that left me with a whole bunch of questions, whole bunch of doubts, a whole bunch of limiting beliefs, right? If it served me in any way, it was a gift. Right, for me, it doesn't matter where that source came from or what that intent was. If it alleviated some kind of uncomfortableness, if it alleviated a problem, right? If it just alleviated my soul just for a few minutes, it's welcomed. It truly is welcomed. And you never know, in that realization of that person who had an expectation, who decided to do something nice for you because, right, you were going to do something nice for them, or at the very least not come after their butts or think that they're the good guy when they had alternative motives, right? Lots of people move that way. Even for myself as a child, I realized that not a lot of things were going to come across my path, right? Nobody outstretched themselves to do kindnesses for me, you know, without that little bit of intent of getting something back, even if it was just love, even if it was just the smile and the appreciation, or maybe in that moment, right? We do it lots of times when we fight with our spouses, or our kids are coming home from school and say, well, this kid has got something. How come they got an iPhone and I'm not allowed to have a phone? And right. And we feel bad for that. They don't understand. They're just kids and all their friends have phones. But in our own parentage, we might think, well, this digital age is a little bit crazy town. You don't know what kind of information is going to be served out to the kids, right? And that's great parenting, which kind of leads me into what I wanted to talk about today. You know, I proposed a question to myself. If I had something that I could offer to the world, if I just said, this is the world, or I declare this to be the law, or, you know, this is, like I said, this is the rules, this is the law, this is what's happening, this is the gift. I proposed that question to me, and I didn't dwell on it. But during the course of the day, because I knew it was the question, I proposed it to myself. And there were specifically two things that I thought would serve the world so well. And it's in relationship to my own childhood, to my upbringing, to some of those barriers, to some of those wrenches that were thrown into my life. Again, maybe some of those expectations of others when they were doing me kindnesses. And I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, this person's the most amazing, kind, angelic person in the whole world, right? Because it did so much for myself, right? And like I said, it doesn't matter what the intent or uh, what was the expectation in serving something good to me, right? If it was a lifeline, it was a lifeline, and that deserves, at the very least, and a thank you or an appreciation. And sometimes those kindnesses that come across our path are not meant to be kindnesses, but in the end, they were just what we needed. And it's in our choices to work with what's given to us or what's offered to us, or ignore it or pass it off to the side. And to each one of us, we get to decide on that. But in my growing up, we're all kind of bumbling along. And when I say bumbling along, it's kind of like bumper cars, the dryer tumbling, the clothes and the tumbling. Sometimes that's being dragged around by the scuff of your neck where you don't know where you're going, but you're going, right? You don't have a choice because you're being dragged. Or again, in that expectation without a gift, without a kindness, that you're being put in your place and put in a place where you don't want to be, that it's not good for you, that it's causing you emotional or mental stress in the moment, or maybe a fear for your own safety, right? And I've been through that so many times in my life. Even today I felt like I was tumbling along in the dryer, expected, like I said, to go off and spend some time, at the forts when it was a holiday and I thought it was going to be busy. It was beautiful outside. The wind was beautiful. I was able to get a sugar-free Slurpee, believe it or not, Crystal Light Slurpee. Oh my goodness, it was absolutely refreshing and delicious. And I picked that up and I went off for my walk with the breeze blowing in my hair, wearing my Egyptian dress with the sparkles, and I sparkled with the intermittent sun hitting me. I must have looked right. I know I looked amazing in it. I wasn't looking for, oh, what a beautiful dress. Where did you get it? But I was prepared to say, oh my goodness, it's from Egypt, right? Because I was kind of impressed of the way that I had kind of researched the information on the outfit that I was wearing. And I've had this outfit for a couple of years, but because of the writing on the tag, I bought it thrifted. It was brand new. It had never been worn before, but it had a tag and it had, right, you could tell it was Middle Eastern or something, right? You could tell by the writing, but I had no idea. Every once in a while, I'd say to somebody, can you take a look at that tag? And, do you think you could tell me, right, what it means or where it's from? And then yesterday I had this idea to pull out my phone and I Google Lens the tag. And the tag told me it was Egyptian. And I was so thrilled that it was Egyptian, number one, because I actually thought it was an East Indian dress. But with all the sparkles and everything, that I thought it must have been like a wedding dress or it was some special occasion dress or something. I don't know what the everyday wear looks like in Egypt, but right, with all the beautiful colors and embroidery, metal embroidery, and the sparkles and everything, right? I expect that it was a pretty nice dress. But in finding out that it was Egyptian, I was all proud of myself, but not just proud that it was an Egyptian dress and not a Hindi dress. And if it was a Hindi dress, that would be amazing too. I just wanted to know where this dress was from, right? But what I was so impressed with is that I was able to Google Lens it, right? And have all that information come to the surface for me so that I could have a better understanding of where it was. And that the idea just hit me. And right away, I took my phone, Google Lensed it, and I had that answer in just a few seconds. This is the world we live in. We are so close to the source, no matter where we are. But it's just in our choices in what do we want to learn, right? What do we want to experience? How do we want to use this age of AI learning? I am such a Google girl. I love Google. I am a YouTube creator. I am a part of that community, but I'm also a Google guide with Google Maps, and I love to do reviews, and I am in the top 10% of provincial park reviewers, and I'm pretty proud of that. I really am. I really have come a long way, and it was only because of my choices. I'm not technically inclined in any way, but in getting these ideas, like this little, right, this little hint that came across my path yesterday. Oh, why don't you just Google Lens it? Right. And in my choices, just to decide to put the action towards it right away and get that answer. If I hadn't put that action, if I hadn't chosen to do that action when that thought came to me, right, that thought would have just been a thought, and that thought would have probably have been gone, and right, I probably would not have thought of it again. There's a chance that information or that serendipity or that breadcrumb would have come across my path again, right? I understand it's in the repetitiveness, it is in the patterning that we get to see, or get to make the choices, right, in our lives. But let's get back to that question that I asked myself. And I'm just going to take down this notification here that's kind of in the corner of my eye. Hello, Eugene. Hello, Eugene. Yeah, but getting back to this question that I posed to myself today when I went to walk, I thought it would be nice to have a question posed, and I could, as I'm walking and looking at the ducks and the geese and the sea fairies, not a ferry, but like the boats that take tourists up and down the river, um, and walking along the river walk. I posed it to myself. And then again this evening, I went for a second walk because when I came home today, I was so I was so depleted that I thought, oh my goodness, right? You overdid it today. Maybe it wasn't super sunny, but it was smoggy out there. We were breathing in the wildfire smoke. That I came home and I decided just to shut things down and just to lay in bed for an hour. And I didn't nap or anything, but I played with my cat. I posed this question to myself again, and it came up with the same answer as I had when I first set out on my walk today, when I first started out on my day, what I would want to bring to the table if I had that option. My idea about mindset, being a process that everybody in this world could use to better get along with themselves, better get along with others, mean being non denominational and not committed to any spiritual or religious idea in specific. I'm being introduced to all kinds, and it is going to be in my choice what I resonate with. But I'm going to understand, and I do understand, not everybody is going to resonate with my spiritual ideas or my religious ideas. But mindset was built, I'm not going to say why it was built, but it serves every nationality, every religion. It serves every political idea, every cultural idea. We would hope, right? We would hope that it would serve culture. We know quite often, right, that not everybody is treated the same in this world. So, again, back to that question that I asked myself, right? You guys know, if you've hung out with me for any length of time, you know one of my mission statements. I have a couple, right? But one of my mission statements is it takes all kinds to make the world. I am an amalgamation. I am an assimilation of all kinds. It's one of the reasons that I am non denominational. And I also understand that, because of my beliefs, because I do have beliefs, and even though I'm not religious or spiritual, uh, I believe that there are parts of me that come back, right? Cindy's not coming back, right? But there are parts of me that are coming back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, right? Sometimes it comes to the surface and stays. Sometimes, right, depending on our upbringing and in that mentorship and guidance in that upbringing, right? They call it nurturing, right? Nurture versus nature. Um, right? That I probably have been many, many, many different religions, right? In past lifetimes. But again, that's an idea and a perspective of mine. And it's not that I expect anybody else to believe or feel the way I do. Each one of us gets to make our own choices in that. And it's not even a choice, it's how we feel, right? 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 I had no idea and I had no understanding. And when I first woke up to some of these ideas, I thought to myself, oh, Cindy, it's just because you wasted so much of your life. It's because, you know, right, when you cried out to God, God didn't come to save you, right? You were always on your own, which it wasn't always true. Sometimes we just need to know that we're loved. Sometimes we just need to know that somebody cares. And I had that in my life. I had that with my father. I had that with my husband. I had that with, right, a couple of men in my life. Um, and, I believe I have that with my sisters, right? We're still sisters. We still butt heads. Are loyal to each other, even though we do influence. I do it too. My sister tells me all the time I'm a little bit preachy in what I do, right? But that's no different than the narcissist being manipulative, right? And I come from a dynamic family of manipulators and liars and beautiful hearts and misunderstood and asleep and awoke. Right? And we all in our choices get to decide whether if we're going to rub with that or we're not. But when we're little children, we don't get a choice. We're just kind of dragged around by the scruff of our necks, and we're just, right? We're just introduced to what our parents want to share, what they believe, what they were brought up in their own nurturing. And that's a big part of it, right? And sometimes in that nurturing, we get misunderstandings. We get that dictation where we don't get a choice, right? That this is the way it is, and because we were brought up, this is the way it is. Like my mother dragged us kids to every church growing up. I went to church probably until I was 12 or 13 years old before I quit going to church. But that was in my own dissolution, right? Because my mother loved Jesus, but my mother was one of those dynamic characters in my own childhood that I was butting heads up with, that I didn't understand. And I believe she didn't understand me. And in that uncomfortableness and that pain that was mutually received and given, right? It caused a lot of issues for me growing up, right? Because I was one of those kids, right? do as I say and not as I do, right? Because I told you so, because I said so, right? And not having a choice, right? Maybe in my own mind, right? I remember lots of times sitting on the end of my bed, going, crying and bawling my eyes out after an experience. And I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, right? And that is a projection that we put on to somebody. But I didn't know any better, right? I didn't have those lessons. And because I was saying it in my mind, right, nobody knew it. They might have seen it in my face, but I didn't have a choice, right? I just had to move along with that guardianship, those ones that thought they knew best, right? And they didn't necessarily know best. I know for a fact that they did not know best. And it's just not a reflection in my life, but it's a reflection in my sisters' lives too. Just in the fact of how we struggle, all of us struggle with weight issues. We always have. We're all in that roller coaster of expectation of what the world expects of us and our natural beings the way we are. And it's sometimes in that natural beings, we don't recognize or understand that that was also nurtured, whether it was nurtured in fear or nurtured to keep us under a thumb, right? And that happens all the time. But getting back now to that question that I asked myself, if I was going, you guys kind of have a feeling where I'm going with this. If if I had a gift that I could just say, this is the rule, this is the way we are going to move now, right? I would say that we should have the expectation of the governments. I'm going to say because I'm Canadian and Canadian government, right? I don't have say in the other governments of the world, but I get to throw my vote in there, right? And because of my mission statement, it takes all kinds to make the world. We need to have mindset institutionalized into the schools so that each child has the information. Each child can make the choice for themselves. That's number one, right? I want mindset in the school system, right? I've even been contemplating and maybe, you know, because my subject is so heavy, I don't know if it's possible, right? If I would be able to do it to an ear of a small child that's so easily influenced. I would much prefer to divvy out that information to the parents or the grandparents because we know the kids are always dropped off at the grandparents' house, and lots of times the grandparents are one of the main influences on the children, right? But if a child has the understanding of what's truly right and wrong in the understandings of mindset, and mindset is universal, all kinds. I work in mindset and I work in the leadership, in the thought leadership, and the leadership, right? Because we can learn off of everybody and anybody, even if we don't like them, right? There are lots of leaders out there that are poop heads, right? But you know, we can learn by that too, right? Not to go near that, not to think like that. But how do we know not to understand things that way, or that we can even think differently for ourselves, or even recognize a right from a wrong and just not expect that the wrongs are right because somebody said, I told you so, right? Do as I say, not as I do. Mindset has to be in the school systems. I just don't see any other way for our children. And I don't have kids myself, right? But I don't see any other way for our children to be able to have a fighting chance unless, at the very least, they have the right understandings in mindset. And mindset is just working on and with common values, right? And boundaries and understandings. And if I had those understandings as a child, I might not have been able, right? I still probably would have been dragged by the scruff of my neck, but I would have, for the life of me, every chance I got to voice and recognize. And I recognize to myself rights from wrongs, but I never had that voice to say, stop it, right? This is awful. You're awful. This is not right. This is causing damage to me. It's causing damage to my sisters. It's causing damage to your relationship with my dad, right? Stop it. You're destroying the family, right? And the problems that we all have, and everybody in my family, including her, had problems. They were only compounded by that do as I say, right? Not just that do as I say, it was a lot of take this. This is what happens. I'll give you something to cry about. And children need to know that it's not right, right? The adults know it's not right. The adults know the damage that they're doing to their kids, especially in these days with the AI learning. That right? Nobody should be able to get away with what was gotten away with in my own family, right? Nobody should. And the parents need to be accountable, right? So it's not just putting mindset in the school system, but teaching the children that they have a choice, right? Maybe in that moment, right? They're not going to face the demon and say no, right? Because you know you're going to end up in a wall or out on the street or black and blue, right? And with limiting beliefs and in fear of movement forward and growing up and having a life that I grew up with. And, I created the best human being I possibly could, despite, right? And despite was a very important word in my life, too, because I felt I had every right to live my life the way that I wanted to. I had every right, in the creation of something spectacular for myself. And whether or not I wasn't going to have big fancy house or have my Prince Charming, and thank goodness I was able to manifest my Prince Charming, right? And that's not to say it didn't last, right? But that doesn't mean that that Prince Charming is not going to come into my life again, because I've been able, in my treading water and in the grace of the amazing lessons in this age of AI learning, that I put myself back in school and I gave myself permission to make choices and to rectify for myself and to understand and see for myself what actually went wrong in my family. Hello, Dave. Oh my goodness. Right? I want to read what Dave said here. Grandparents are important. Mine were on a farm in PI. Absolutely beautiful. The dirt is just red, copper red potatoes. They grow potatoes, right? In PI. But me and my husband, we We took a trip to the East Coast and we traveled for a month on the East Coast. It was absolutely amazing. Grandparents are important. Mine were on a farm in PI, a hand pump for water, and an outhouse in the middle of a cow pasture. That sounds like heaven, right? And how were the relationships with your grandparents? Loving? Like, I was never afraid of hard work, right? I never was. And I was never afraid of taking in a hard lesson or, right? Or in those quotes that my dad loved to, right, throw out there. And, right, those were my lighthouses in even waking up to some of these ideas that, maybe as a child I thought they were kind of goofy, but he was my dad. So we followed all those quotes, and there were lots of them, right? There were lots of them, and all meant with good intent. And in the end, they served me. They were his little ways of sneaking in the lessons because my mother was so domineering in that household. And my father, being the person that he was, the soul that he was in the midst of his own, and he rode those waves the best that he could, right? But it could have been better if we had had some help from the government, right? To government to set some ground rules, some values that every single child knew that they could live by, that they could understand and believe were to be true. So at the very least, they can make their choices and say, oh my goodness, my family is crazy town, right? I better think for myself, right? That that's not right. My mother lies. My mother's a big my mother was a big liar over the silliest thing, and I knew I'm such a radar person. I just that stuff comes across my path. I see it through. Oh my goodness, right? And it was one of the reasons that I didn't trust her. And she might have sensed that I didn't trust her that way. She might have even sensed that I saw the person that she was. And, right? She just doubled down. She doubled down. But parents do have to be held accountable. When I was a kid, there was no child family services. And even if there was, I would have fought to stay in my household because, my father was used as a weapon to keep me in place, right? Do this, or don't tell your dad, or you're going to give him a heart attack, or be quiet, your dad's sleeping, and which is understandable. Those kind of rules I would abide by, right? But it is in the intent, and right, and sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it's not with intent that these things happen to the children. It's just because of the way those adults who were once children themselves, how they were divvied out their life lessons in the guardianship that they had. But the kids, right? They need to be taught mindset. Mindset is universal. It's what pulled me in, and I allowed myself and my own choices to be pulled into mindset. And thank goodness, because, right, I was weary of religion, right? Because my mother was very religious, but she was not emotionally well all that way. Anybody who would handle their children and family that way is not emotionally or mentally well. And kids need to understand that. Kids need to have a choice. And remember, I had the two extremes. My father loved me more than anything, and he snuck in those lessons here and there where he could. And he was the king of his castle, but my mother was just as much the queen of the castle. And because my dad was so irresponsible and he caused, right, in his own coping mechanism and his own limiting beliefs. He had problems, and my mother held that against him and his gambling addictions, right? That she got to be king as well as queen in the household, and my father pretty much had to abide by that. Otherwise, right, there would be consequences. And because my mother knew how much I meant to him, right, he was probably appeasing her, knowing that, right, he would pay in the way in what would happen to me in that. And right, that took me years to understand. It took me years to understand. When I first came into mindset, right, I held that against my father because, his only chore was to make sure that his kids were taken care of, that that he had to watch over us. And right, he just wasn't able to. And that took a lot of forgiveness and a lot of lessons and a lot of understanding and my choices. But those choices came when I was 57 years old. I was in my 60s before I truly understood it because, right, it was a ride for a while, right? It was a crazy town ride. But so grateful that things are, I'd like to say, settling down, but right, I feel the stir in the pot right now. And in the lessons, I understand there's changes. And this is why I asked myself this question today that I wanted to contemplate. Because if I get to add on to that pool of understanding or grooming or, right, something to try that might serve the next generations coming forward, I would have to say, right, it has to be the mindset, right? Not everybody gets to have the realization of two parents. Sometimes, especially in this day and age, that it's one parent that's raising the children. It's one parent. My parent, right? One parent that was dictating the rules of life. And, these rules of life, they stay for us for life without something to compare it in. So parents do have to be held accountable, and just not held accountable to their children, because we know lots of times with divorce and stuff, we still end up with just one perspective. But if the schools helped out in that we would be able to hold our parents accountable as children a little bit by saying, oh my goodness, I'm going to talk to the counselors, right? And understand that it's okay to talk to the counselors, because when I grew up, I wasn't allowed to talk to the counselors. All hell would break loose if I talked about anything about our household outside of the household. But this is the way the children are groomed. This is the way the children are brought up, and it's unfair, and it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt civilization if we don't do something in it right now. And being in this age of AI learning, this is the best opportunity to do it. So my wish is to get, my dream is to wish, my dream is to bestow upon the world, right? Mindset in the school systems. I think it will serve well. I think it will make it so that this world would be a more enjoyable, beautiful, progressive, and in our own survival, in our evolution, human evolution, it would serve us well in the creation of the best human being we possibly can, because kids are growing up not even wanting to have kids these days. Sometimes it's just accidental. For me, I never had children, but it was accidental childlessness. And in this moment, I could say I'm so appreciative. I'm so grateful that I didn't get to have children because I would have passed down those issues that I had. And we all want to do better by our kids, right? When we have crappy parents, right? That or crappy guardianship, however we grow up, that we just pass that down to our kids because, right? We are what our parents are. We don't understand that we can use our own noggins and our own heart to dictate for ourselves how we want to live, right? What we want to contribute. Who's the king of the castle, right? Possibly it was a castle full of kings and queens, and we were just all butting heads with each other. But if that's the case, then mindset would have served us all, and we would have better had a foundation of values to kind of work and live and exist with each other. And that's the truth. Okay. Relations were wonderful. They taught me how to go to the hen house and get eggs, how to keep the wood stove from cooking always going on. And my seven siblings learned the same. Oh, so amazing, right? And there is that growth out there. There is that good guidance out there, but so much of it has gone to pot. So much of it has gone down the drain. So much of it has been forgotten. So much of it has been ignored. And so much of it, because of the king and queens of the castles, have been dictated, right? And that's absolutely beautiful. I knew you were beautiful, Dave. I knew you were beautiful, right? But sometimes we don't recognize what's beautiful because it's covered in emotional issues or mental issues or physical issues, right? And then we just think the only ones that are worthy are the beautiful people and the rich people and the people who give. And this is the way that I was brought up. This is the way that I was raised. This was my mindset right up until my late 50s. And it took a lot of treading water to get course corrected in that, right? And, if I had that opportunity to have babies now, oh my goodness, right? I would be the best mom ever. I wouldn't be I wouldn't be a pushover, but I certainly wouldn't have been a dictator or an abuser in any way. And it would have been full of love because it was only the love that was that water in the desert for me. And that's the truth. Otherwise, I don't think there was even a possibility that I would have made it to where I am right now. Um, Oh, and also to put down and pick up lobster traps and dig up clams on the back shore of the farm. Oh, how beautiful. PEI, Nova Scotia. Oh my goodness. Cape Breton. I didn't get to Cape Breton. We had to take another boat to get across there, but we did take the ferry to PEI. That was spectacular. My eyes bulged out of my head. I couldn't believe the color of the dirt. As you're coming towards the island, all you just see is fields of dirt. Yeah, I love PEI. And actually, when we were in, was it PEI or Nova Scotia? Uh, was one of my husband's friends, and we went to visit. We got caught in a big snowstorm in May, and a tractor. It turned out if they were Amish or Hutterite. They pulled us out of the because we swerved and we ended up in a ditch, and they came along and pulled us out. They were so kind, right? And then when we visited um, my husband's friends whose parents lived in Nova Scotia, they were in Nova Scotia, uh, right? They gave us the keys to their summer cottage, told us we could just stay as long as we wanted. It was spectacular. And we ate canned lobster. I didn't know you could can lobster, but we had canned lobster and scallops. We had scallops. And yeah, it was amazing. I just love the East Coast. The East Coast is ocean, it's the Atlantic Ocean, but it had such a different feel to the Pacific Coast. I grew up on the Pacific Coast. I'm from Vancouver. Well, actually, all over British Columbia. My dad was a nomad. He was always picking us up and moving us somewheres. But in BC, it's beaches. It's like Hawaii in the summer, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Not to say that the East Coast isn't gorgeous, but it's different. It's hard and it's dark and it's cliffy, like out of the scary horror movies and stuff, right? One of those Vincent, what is it? Vincent Price movies. It's There's a big difference between the oceans to the shore on the two sides of Canada, and I suspect it's the same kind of idea in the states between the Pacific and the Atlantic. But yeah, I so enjoyed that trip. I'm still not a big fan of seafood. I do love scallops though. I really do love scallops, but I haven't had scallops for a very long time. Um, oh, really? I didn't know you were in the RCAF. I have actually some glasses, drinking glasses, because they disbanded, didn't they, over what went on with Somalia, and yeah, because I had some friends who had to become what do you call them? Grug, grubs, grubs. My husband was in the military, so when they disbanded, my husband was one of those people that ended up being targeted because he had the Yosemite Sams and the rebel flags, and he wasn't my husband didn't have a racial bone in his body. He lived by the same values. It takes all kinds to make the world, just like I did. But because of that, they kind of targeted him and got him out of the army, and that was so heartbreaking for him. He was out for like 6 months. He had just come back from a tour of Croatia, and he was messed up from that tour. And then when they were right getting rid of him, he was just heartbroken. He was just heartbroken. But he knew lots of people. Everybody loved my husband, and he ended up coming back through the back. They call it coming in the back door. He came in the back door, and he re-enlisted through another branch of the military that he had people in there, right? And but that didn't last because he was hiding post traumatic stress disorder. And yes, this is what the guys do when they come back from. Did you do tours? Did you do tours, Dave? Um, uh, he did tour. He did a few tours, but he did 2 tours of Croatia. And when he came back, you don't show your weakness when you have problems, right? And I recognized, because of some of the experience I personally had with some of the guys when they came back, that they were pretty messed up. Some of them got better in a few days, some of them in a few weeks or a few months. A year. I found out my husband's post traumatic stress disorder only because the Padre got a hold of me and wanted to talk to me about it. We were separated a year before I even knew that he had gotten these mental illnesses from the tours. His job was to right take out the people who had been buried, because the people were being buried everywhere and it was polluting the water system. So his job was to rebury them in different places, right? And It really bothered him. And plus, there were a couple of incidences that I found out afterwards that really impacted him. But, these are in our choices. My husband made choices in that in his career. And in doing that, he sacrificed his emotional and mental well being and the job that he loved so much. He loved that job. And when he lost that job, right, because he lost it again when they found out he had post traumatic stress disorder, it was the reason why, our marriage fell apart. It was a contributing reason, right? There were lots of reasons, but it contributed definitely, um, that it broke him. It really did. And he was such an amazing, loving, caring, romantic, sexy man. He was. And I'd be hard pressed to find another one. So who's to say going down the road if it would ever happen for me again, because I had it pretty amazing for as long as I had it. I couldn't, right? If I saw him today, if I bumped into him tomorrow, right? We would fly into each other's arms, right? We wouldn't start up where we left off. That, right? That's a story that's ended. But those emotions and that love, that will never die, right? That never die. He was my Prince Charming, right? And I was his Cinderella for, oh my goodness, we were together for 8 years, 8 years, and we ended it amicably, right? Because I never wanted there to be bad feelings. And, I understood his heart and he understood me. We were the same, right? He was very, just as empathic as I was, probably even more, because I do believe he was probably a little bit woke when I was not, right? So it was in my own choice. Well, it wasn't in my choices because we don't get to choose when and if we wake up, right? But I bet you if we had mindset in the school systems, the people who were meant to wake up and change the world to a better place, right? They would have a better chance, right? So, mindset in the school systems, having the parents more accountable, right? And I get it. Don't tell me how to bring up my kids. But if you don't do a good job, it's a fair way so that, all children get a fair shot to be able to grow up and make some choices for themselves and have better understandings. Because I tell you, I would have made different choices. Probably not in my living experience because my dad was so sick there you couldn't pull me away from my dad if my life depended on it. So I was in it for the long haul, but I would have better understood, right? I would have better understood, and I might have, probably would have, should have, could have, right? Woken up a whole lot sooner than I did. Okay. Dave says, I love scallops, right? And mussels. My grandfather was an Argyle Highlander. Oh, that sounds so awesome. Oh, doesn't that sound awesome? Argyle Highlander. I could just see the kilts and the bagpipes and the marching bands. My dad loved the marching bands. You listen to him put those albums on. He was very technical. My dad, it was the 70s. It wasn't the digital age, but I tell you, he had speakers that were like 6 feet high. He had, right, big old TVs that were something out of 2001 Space Odyssey. He loved the amplifiers. As soon as Nintendo came out, my dad was still alive when Nintendo came out, and the Beta machine, right? He loved, my dad loved technology. He loved innovation. He was a big Carl Sagan and David Suzuki fan, and yeah, a lot different than my favorites, right? My favorites are, he loved the mindset, he loved the stoicism, but he had his favorites, and I have my favorites too. Lots of times we keep them tight to our hearts because, we don't want we don't want them taken out, or right, because lots of times to get it ourselves, when somebody's trying to get at us and they feel they can't get at us, they'll go at who we love and they'll try and take out who we love and who we care for, right? Just like my mother did with me, right? And made it so that my dad was a prisoner in his own castle, right? And that's the truth. That's just the way it goes. But you know what? Things could change, right? I declare it. I declare it. Mindset in the school systems, right? I almost ended up homeless, and they put me through a program. It was for to get reemployed and to have more stable job aspects, because after my marriage fell apart, I couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, and that's the truth, right? And I did hold on to one job. I absolutely loved it. I had it for 5 years, but that was to help me get out of that, right? I needed to heal. I had to get over my broken marriage and stuff, and it served me well, and I had lots of money, good hours. I really liked the job. That was helpful. But after I lost that job, right, one of those, I can't take this anymore, I quit, right? I ended up just having 2 months here, 6 months here. I just could not hold on. I didn't even want to hold on to jobs anymore, right? I just didn't like and didn't want to be dictated to anymore. I just felt like I was just everybody's scapegoat in that, right? But yeah, my grandfather was an Argyle Highlander during World War One. My father was uh, Argyle during World War Two. My son was a Canadian Argyle and Highlander. Did 2 years in Afghanistan. Now heels, married to a beautiful Brazilian. Oh my goodness, and the way you said beautiful, right? It takes all kinds to make the world, right? It's the world is changing so much. We are all going to be Heinz 57s. We are all going to be amalgamated and assimilated, right? Right? We're going to be some kind of beigey color, beigey color, right? Because we will be all mixed up, not just in our ideas and in our partnerships, but our children and our children's children. And who's to say 1,000 years from now, 100,000 years from now, what a human being is actually going to look like, right? I'm pretty excited to know. Why am I pretty excited to know? Because I know that I'm still going to be here, right? Right? I love this world, and lots of people think it's crazy town, and yes, it's crazy town, but there's lots of beautiful in it, right? And it's just because we don't have that answers. It's just because we haven't amalgamated and assimilated enough yet. But there's some great leadership out there, right? And there's some great ideas, and there's some great movement out there. And if we could stop, right, in those attacks and let the children decide for themselves what's right and wrong and what they want to pursue, right? Right. And it was probably the values in the Highlanders that you from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, that you all wanted to go in and serve, right? And yeah, oh my goodness, thank you for your family service. I know it sounds hokey, Dave, but you know what? In a messed up world where we don't have a choice, that we do have to butt heads and we do have to stand our grounds, to know that there's, right, organizations and troops and, right, battalions and churches and religious ideas and spiritual ideas and just great leadership in general that, right, maybe the kids of today or the kids of tomorrow can grow up and have that choice and not that expectation. You're going to be a doctor whether you like it or not. You're going to be a lawyer whether you like it or not, right? Right? That we get to choose. And then when you see it, when you see the magnificent, you see the values, you see the stoicism and the kindness and how loving and well balanced a family, just one family, can be from one generation to the next. It makes you wanna, right? It makes you want to. Makes you want to be the doctor. It makes you want to be the lawyer. It makes you want to be the Highlander, right? And not to do it just because you have to. That was a long one today, you guys. Dave, it was so nice to see you in here. Oh my goodness. And Eugene, I don't know if Eugene's still here. I hope you're having a great night. Probably saw Dave and off he went. Hello, JD. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Welcome, welcome. Everybody, I think I'm going to have to call it a night tonight. I went out. I don't know. What does Ontario call um, today? Here in Manitoba, we call it Terry Fox Day, but I know in this holiday, each province calls it something else. Oh my goodness. I went down the aisle by bagpipes. My husband said, "You can have the white New Yorkers for the wedding, or you can have the bagpipes." And I chose the bagpipes. And then the day of the weddings, he says, "Where's the cars?" And I said, "I chose the bagpipes. You told me I had a choice. I chose the bagpipes." And then he scurried around. He found some white New Yorkers, and yeah, it all worked out in the end. Ah, hello, JD. Thank you so much for popping in. And I love that contribution tonight, Dave. Right? It makes me appreciate you even more. Yeah, it makes me understand your heart even more. That's absolutely amazing, right? I wish a good upbringing and good examples of what a good upbringing it is in every family. So that's why I set the rule. That's why I bestow. That's why I declare mindset in the school systems, right? Help parents by holding them accountable in what they don't understand. Oh, really? 79. I got married in 93. I got married when I was, how old was I when I got married? I just turned 30 and my husband just turned 20. I was 10 years older than my husband. It always seems to work out that way. Maybe I don't look my age. Maybe I don't act my age. But yeah, I've always been attracted. And it's not the fact that I'm going after younger guys. He just swept me up. It just, right, I didn't have a choice. It had nothing to do with his age. But I noticed that it works out that way quite often. Everybody, that's my good cheer. 10 after 1, it's bedtime. We get to wake up and start all over tomorrow. You guys, have a great night. Thank you, everyone, for popping in.